I was on third watch when the channel stayed open. That is the part I keep returning to. Not the firefight at the Verith perimeter, not the casualty figures, not the formal inquiry that went nowhere. The part that stays with me is a channel that should have closed and didn't, and chain of events that followed from that one small, silent refusal. My name is Vetharan. I was a signals rating aboard the Fleet Command vessel Valdesi, assigned to the secondary comms array during the Verith engagement. My job was to monitor auxiliary unit frequencies, log transmissions, and real priority flags to the watch officer. I was good at it. I was precise. I kept my records clean, and I did not ask questions that were not mine to ask. I tell you this so you understand. I know what a channel sounds like when it's functioning correctly. And I know what one sounds like when a being on the other end has simply decided to close it. The Verith ground campaign had been running for 11 days. The Valdesi was holding position in high orbit. From up there, the engagement looked manageable. Tactical summaries came up every 4 hours. Casualty ratios were within projected parameters. The Valdesi's commander, a senior fleet officer named Eric Solth, reviewed each summary with the calm of a being who had run 14 ground campaigns and expected this one to behave like the others. The auxiliary force attached to our ground element was small, a human squad, 8 personnel, assigned to forward reconnaissance under a human NCO designated Harrow in our command registry. We did not use their full designations at that level of the hierarchy. They were an asset code, a frequency, a set of position pings on a tactical display. I knew their frequency the way I knew the frequency of every unit in my sector. I did not think about them particularly. On day 11, the Eastern Corridor collapsed. We won't construct tactical details. They're in the official record, such as it is. What I can tell you is that the collapse was fast, and the Verith ground forces moved to encircle our forward elements before the watch officer had finished reading the flash report. By the time Eric Solth was standing at the tactical display, 3 of our ground units were already extracted. 4th, Harrow's squad, was not. The position ping for Harrow's unit stopped updating at 214 hours. The frequency showed carrier only. The channel was open. Someone was transmitting presence, but no voice came through and no data packets were moving. The watch officer called it. She reviewed the position data, checked the encirclement geometry, and made the determination that extraction was not viable. In her log, she noted, with the clean language of someone doing their job correctly, Auxiliary Unit Harrow, status unrecoverable, asset written to loss. All command traffic to cease on this frequency. She passed that determination to Eric Solth. He confirmed it without comment. It went to me for execution. I keyed the command channel, transmitted the order in the standard format. Stand down instruction, frequency clear code, acknowledgement required within 60 seconds. Harrow acknowledged. That was the part that surprised me. The channel was live. He had been listening, and the acknowledgement came back within 15 seconds, clean and correctly formatted. Acknowledgement confirmed, stand down received, frequency clear code logged. And then he didn't clear the frequency. I waited. 60 seconds. The carrier was still present. I ran a diagnostic because my first assumption was equipment fault. The equipment was functioning correctly. I transmitted the frequency clear instruction a second time. He acknowledged it a second time. The carrier stayed open. I flagged it to the watch officer. She looked at the display, noted the carrier, and transmitted a direct instruction under her own authority. Harrow, you are ordered to clear this channel. Confirm compliance. His reply was 4 words. I have them memorized because I have thought about them many times in the years since. Still here. Line open. That was all. No explanation, no argument, no statement of intent. Just those 4 words in the carrier holding. The watch officer escalated to Eric Solth. He arrived at my station, reviewed the exchange, and his skin did the thing cephalopod officers do when they are controlling irritation. The slow darkening of the mantle, slight retraction of the outer tentacles. He was not alarmed. He was annoyed. We had a written-off asset tying up a designated frequency on what he considered a closed matter. He transmitted personally. I watched him do it. Harrow. This unit has been formally declared unrecoverable. Your orders are to stand down and clear this channel. That is a direct command from fleet level. Confirm compliance and cease transmission. There was a pause of perhaps 10 seconds. Confirmed, Harrow said. Line stays open. I had been in signals work for 9 years. I had never heard a being formally confirm a direct command from fleet level, and then simply not obey it. Eric Sulth turned to look at me as though I might have an explanation. I had none, the carrier held. What happened over the next 40 minutes I can describe in 2 ways. The version that appears in the inquiry record, and the version I actually watched unfold on the frequency display in front of me. The inquiry record says that a routing anomaly in the auxiliary comms system caused several human-adjacent unit frequencies to temporarily converge, shared carrier. It says this was a known limitation of the auxiliary integration protocols and had been flagged in a prior technical review. It recommends a firmware correction. What I watched was this. 4 minutes after Eric Sulth's exchange with Harrow, a second carrier appeared on an adjacent frequency. A human combat engineer unit operating 2 sectors south of Verith. They were not tasked to the eastern corridor. They had no orders routing them toward Harrow's position. The carrier appeared, sat there, and then I heard something I had not expected. A voice, brief and flat, speaking in the human common register. "We hear you." Then quiet, the carrier stayed. 6 minutes after that, a third frequency lit. A human logistics detachment that had been on resupply rotation since day 8. Off the active tasking board entirely, the carrier opened no words, just presence. Then a fourth, then a fifth. I was not looking at isolated unit frequencies anymore. I was looking at a pattern. Every human-designated frequency in my sector range was routing its carrier through the same point. Harrow's open channel. They weren't transmitting orders to each other. They weren't filing requests up the command chain. They were doing something I did not have a protocol entry for. They were answering. Eric Sulth saw it on the display at the same time I did. I watched the darkening of his mantle go from irritation to something else, something slower, that I recognized later as the particular discomfort of a senior officer, realizing the shape of a situation he cannot easily intervene in. He did not transmit again. He stood at my station and he watched. The position pings began moving at 0317 hours. Not Harrow's, was still static, still in the encirclement. The pings that moved were the others. Converging, 4 separate approach vectors, in what I can only describe as a coordinated geometry for a perimeter breach. No coordination order was logged. No combined operations request had been filed. There was no command structure authorizing any of this. There was only the open channel and the carriers. And whatever it means when beings like that hear a line held open and decide, without being asked, that the answer to that is, "We are coming." The Verith ground forces held their encirclement for 22 minutes after the movement began. I have reviewed the ground sensor data from that period. I will not detail what is in it. I will say that it is consistent with a coordinated breach by personnel who did not appear to find the operation especially difficult. The Valdesi's watch officer filed a medical priority extraction request for Harrow's unit at 0341 hours. All 8 personnel were recovered. Injuries were documented, all survivable. Harrow's after-action entry in the log was brief. Under actions taken, he had written 4 words. The same 4 words he had transmitted to Eric Sulth. Still here, line open. Under outcome, he had written. Unit recovered. No further action required. Nothing about the other units. Nothing about the channel. Nothing to explain how 8 beings declared unrecoverable had come back through a collapsed perimeter in the middle of the night, while Fleet Command watched from orbit and did not fully understand what they were seeing. The inquiry produced the firmware recommendation. Eric Sulth filed his summary and did not request further review. I was reassigned to a different watch rotation 8 weeks later, which I have always taken as the administration's way of moving on. I have thought about those 40 minutes a great deal since then. What I keep returning to is not the breach, not the recovered unit, not even the calm forward transmission. What I keep returning to is the moment before any of it happened. The moment when Harrow heard the order, firmed it, and simply did not obey. Because somewhere down in that encircled position, he had made a calculation that the channel being open was worth more than any instruction to close it. He didn't argue. He didn't explain. He didn't ask for help. He just held the line and waited to see who answered. I think about that when I hear people ask what makes a Class 17 world different. The biology is part of it. Pain tolerance is part of it. But I was at the signals board that night, and the part that has stayed with me for the rest of my career is something you cannot measure in a classification index. They do not let go.